Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're going to break down a really fascinating, kind of counterintuitive strategy for how you can achieve huge goals. It actually comes from a situation where winning seemed totally impossible. It's called the 30% rule, and honestly, it might just change the way you look at pretty much every challenge you face.
I mean, think about it. It's a classic problem, right? You want to make a really big change, but you are up against a much more powerful opponent. What's your first move? What do you do?
Well, for a lot of us, that first instinct is to fight back, to protest, to show some force. But the source material we're digging into today says, hold on a second. It argues that this is actually a huge strategic mistake when you're the one with less power.
And this is a really key distinction here. The real difference isn't about being weak versus strong. It's all about the method you choose. The source argues that trying to use brute force when you don't have it, well, that's actually a sign of strategic weakness. The truly skillful approach, the smart approach, relies on your intellect, on your strategy, and on your persuasion.
And this quote pretty much sums it all up. When you're outmatched, trying to meet strength with more strength is just a losing game. It's going to lead to a lot of sacrifice and probably for nothing. The intellectual path, that strategic path, is something else entirely.
Okay, so if a direct fight is off the table, what's the alternative? And no, the answer is not to just roll over and accept it. It's a quieter, more methodical, and it turns out a much more powerful strategy.
So, instead of yelling in the streets, you start acting like a scholar. You meticulously, logically build an undeniable case on paper. Then you submit it. And then you submit it again. And you use the press not to cause a stir, but to explain. You just patiently build this public understanding until your logic is something they just can't ignore anymore.
This whole idea is just perfectly captured in a Korean proverb. A drizzling rain soaks your clothes. Think about it. A single drop of rain, it's nothing. But a slow, quiet, persistent drizzle will eventually soak you completely. It's the same idea here. Each documented proposal, each press briefing, it's just one drop. But over time, their effect adds up and becomes undeniable.
So all this patient, relentless work building your case, it's all setting the stage for the actual negotiation. And this is where the strategy reveals its most surprising and most powerful secret.
Well, it's definitely not about stomping your feet and demanding everything you think you want or deserve. Actually, doing that is pretty much the fastest way to fail. The real secret is understanding this fundamental principle of how to reach an agreement when you're dealing with a more powerful group.
And here it is. The source calls this the absolute ironclad condition for success. If you want to get everything you're aiming for, you do not ask for all of it. You don't even ask for half of it. You start by asking for just 30%.
Now, the number itself is what's so important here. 30%. Why? Well, because asking for everything all at once just throws up a giant wall of resistance. But 30%? That feels manageable. It feels reasonable. It's a low-risk proposition for the other side. It's that classic foot-in-the-door technique that makes it so much easier for them to say yes to a small thing first, which then opens the door for the bigger things later on.
So your entire focus in the beginning, all that documentation and persuasion we talked about, it should all be aimed at just one thing: securing this first, crucial slice. This is your first victory, and it's the one victory that makes everything else possible.
All right, so how does this actually play out in the real world? That first 30% isn't the end of the story. It's just the foundation. From there, it all unfolds in a pretty simple three-step process.
You see, it's this phased approach that just builds momentum. First, you get that initial 30% and you execute it perfectly. That success proves you know what you're doing, which makes it way easier to get the next 30%. And once you've delivered on 60% and you've built all that trust, that final 40%, it often follows without much of a fight.
Psychologically, this strategy is just brilliant. As you can see, it's all about building trust one step at a time. It lowers the barrier for them to say yes, because you're minimizing the initial risk. You prove your idea works in a low-stakes environment, and you go from being this unknown quantity to a credible partner. I love the analogy of a contract with a deposit, an interim payment, and then the final payment. You earn the next stage by delivering on the last one.
And when you lay it out like this, the difference in the outcomes is it's stark. Demanding everything at once, that just leads to a dead end. But the phased approach, it creates this clear, logical path that leads straight to success.
Now, it's really tempting to look at this and just think, okay, that's a clever negotiation tactic. But the source material is really clear that this is something much more fundamental.
I mean, just listen to that language for a second. This isn't just a good idea. The source is calling it an unbreakable law, like gravity. And they argue that if you ignore it, you are literally trying to do the impossible.
And you could apply this principle way beyond just a single negotiation. Think about trying to raise money for a business, or launching a huge project, or even a personal goal, like running a marathon. Any big leap has to be broken down into these manageable, trust-building phases, right? You don't just go out and run 26 miles on your first day. You build up to it, proving at each stage that the next one is actually possible.
And that really leaves us with a final and I think really powerful question for you. Look at the biggest thing that you're trying to achieve in your life right now. And just for a minute, stop thinking about that 100% finish line in the distance goal. Instead, ask yourself this: what is my first 30%? What is that reasonable, achievable first victory that can open the door to everything else? That might just be the most important strategic question you can ask.